My name is Agnes. I am 78 years old, and this very house you see behind my words, has been the beating heart of my existence for over half a century. 50 years. Can you truly grasp what that means? It's not just four walls and a roof. It's a living archive of my life. My husband Arthur, a man of quiet strength and calloused hands, built it with his own two hands. Every creak in the floorboards, every sunbeam slicing through the kitchen window, every faded stain on the wallpaper whispers his name, his laughter, our shared dreams. This house isn't just a place. It's a testament to a love story, a family built from the ground up, brick by painstaking brick. Our children, Robert, Sarah, and Michael, grew up within these walls. They scraped their knees on these very carpets. Their cries and giggles echoed through these high ceilings. They learned to walk, to speak, to dream here. This house was their fortress, their sanctuary, their first taste of home. Or so I thought. Last Tuesday, the silence of my afternoon was shattered by their arrival. All three of them. A coordinated effort. Robert, my eldest, with his practiced air of authority. Sarah, my only daughter, meticulously dressed, her smile a little too tight around the edges. And Michael, the youngest, always a ghost in the room, his eyes glued to his phone even as he walked through the door. They sat around my dining table, the very table where we had carved Thanksgiving turkeys, blown out birthday candles, raised toasts to graduations and engagements, a table imbued with warmth and shared joy. But that day, the warmth was gone, replaced by a cold clinical efficiency. This wasn't a family gathering. This was a tribunal, a quiet, calculated dismantling of my future, disguised as a benevolent intervention. I called it what it was, a declaration of war. A war waged not with shouts or gunfire, but with polite phrases and well-meaning smiles, aimed straight at the heart of my independence. They started with the usual pleasantries, of course. Too saccharine, too forced. Robert, always the loudest, boomed, "How are you, Mom? You look rested." An odd compliment, implying I needed rest from some unseen battle. Sarah asked, "Did you remember your vitamins today, Mom, and your lunch?" Her questions weren't out of love, but out of a subtle probing, an assessment. Michael, bless him, just mumbled a vague greeting, retreating into his digital world. I'd noticed this pattern for weeks, a heightened attentiveness that felt less like care and more like surveillance, a forced cheerfulness that felt like a prelude to bad news. My intuition, a finely tuned instrument, after nearly 8 decades of navigating the world, screamed at me. A knot tightened in my stomach. I tried to dismiss it, to believe they still saw me, Agnes, their mother, their matriarch, and not just a problem, a fading portrait in a dusty frame. "Mom," Robert began, clearing his throat, his gaze unwavering, like a prosecutor building his case. He always took charge, just like his father, but Arthur's leadership had always been rooted in love, not control. "We've been talking. A lot, actually. The three of us." Sarah nodded vigorously, her eyes darting nervously to mine, then away, unable to hold my gaze. "We're just worried about you, Mom. Truly, living all alone in this big house. It's so much. Big house. My home. The place where my grandchildren had crawled across the same floorboards their parents had. The house that held the scent of every Sunday roast, every Christmas tree, every spring rainstorm." "Worried about what, exactly?" I asked, my voice betraying none of the tremor that had started in my hands. The knot in my stomach tightened further. I knew what this meant. It always meant they wanted something. Or, worse, they wanted to take something away. "Well," Robert continued, leaning forward, elbows on the polished wood of the dining table, encroaching on my space. It's a lot of upkeep, isn't it? The garden, the stairs, the roof that needs repairs. The heating bills are astronomical. We think it's just too much for you now, Mom. Too much for me. I looked around my living room, filled with the echoes of a rich, full life. Every cushion plumped by my hands, every book carefully chosen, every photograph a frozen moment of joy or sorrow. My life, still very much mine, still being lived. I manage perfectly fine, I said, my voice gaining a deceptive calm. I have Martha. She comes twice a week for the heavy cleaning. George next door helps with the garden. He's a gem. And the stairs? My legs are still strong enough. I walk these stairs every day, up to my bedroom, down to the kitchen. Each step a small victory. But what about when Martha can't make it? Sarah interjected, her tone edged with a concern that felt more like a thinly veiled accusation. What if George gets sick? What if you fall? What if there's an emergency, Mom? We can't always be here, you know. We have our own lives. No, they couldn't always be here. Not when their own lives were so packed, so demanding. Their children's sports, their demanding careers, their exotic vacations, their new investments. My life, my needs had become an inconvenient footnote in their meticulously planned schedules. We think, Robert announced, his voice firming, leaving no room for argument. It's time for you to downsize, Mom. Downsize. The word resonated in the silent room, a cold clinical term that felt like a death knell. It wasn't just about moving to a smaller dwelling. It was about shrinking my world. Shrinking me, condensing a lifetime into a few manageable boxes. Downsize to what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though I already dreaded the inevitable answer. The knot in my stomach was now a hard, unyielding stone. Michael, who had been conspicuously silent, finally spoke, his gaze fixed on a faint scratch on the table. There's a lovely, assisted living community, Mom. Northwood Manor. It's got everything. Activities, communal meals, doctors on site. You wouldn't be lonely. You'd have company. Company. Did they truly think my solitude was loneliness? Sometimes, yes. But the thought of forced bingo games, scheduled meal times, and superficial conversations with strangers sent a visceral shudder through me. This house was my company. It held Arthur's scent, my children's childhood echoes, my entire personal history. It was a repository of memories, a place where I felt truly myself. Northwood Manor? The name itself tasted like dust in my mouth. It was as if they were discussing an outdated piece of furniture that no longer fit the decor, a relic to be put away. It's a wonderful place, Mom, Sarah chirped, suddenly more animated, as if she were a real estate agent trying to close a deal. We've already looked at a few units. They're quite spacious. You could even bring some of your smaller furniture, your favorite armchair, maybe a few photos. Smaller furniture. My antique oak dresser, a cherished heirloom passed down from my grandmother, a sturdy sentinel of generations. The magnificent grandfather clock that chimed the hours of my life, the armchair where Arthur read his papers, the worn fabric still carrying the imprint of his presence, my grand piano, silent since he left, but still a monument to our shared love of music, to countless evenings spent lost in melodies. These were not smaller furniture. These were my life's anchors, my tangible connection to everything I held dear. And what about this house? I asked, my voice eerily calm, my gaze sweeping over the familiar walls, the subtle patterns of light filtering through the windows, the walls that had absorbed a lifetime of secrets, joys, and sorrows. Robert took a deep breath, his chest expanding with an air of self-importance. Well, Mom, The market is very good right now. Extremely good. It's a prime location, as you know. We think we could get a very handsome price for it. The words struck me, one by one, like carefully aimed stones. They weren't just moving me, they were selling my home. Our home, without a single word to me, without a shred of consultation. They had already decided, they had already planned. My life, my future, had been neatly packaged and labeled, ready for disposal. A handsome price, I repeated, the bitterness a metallic taste on my tongue. And what, pray tell, would you do with this handsome price? Michael mumbled something about covering the costs of your care, Mom, making sure you're comfortable. Sarah, quick to elaborate, added, and whatever is left, it would be divided among us, of course. It's only fair, Mom. Your inheritance, you know. It's just being managed preemptively. Fair. Fair? This was not fair. This was a hostile takeover. A polite, well-meaning, utterly ruthless hostile takeover of my life, my inheritance, which I had always intended for them, for their well-being, was being preemptively seized. My dignity, systematically dismantled. Peace, by agonizing peace. I looked at their faces. Robert, confident, almost smug, basking in his self-appointed role as family leader. Sarah, trying to project empathy, but her eyes betraying a hint of impatience, a desire to get this unpleasant business over with. Michael, still avoiding my gaze, but nodding along, complicit in this quiet conspiracy. They weren't looking at their mother. They weren't seeing Agnes, the woman who had brought them into the world, who had sacrificed and nurtured. They were looking at an asset, a problem to be managed, a burden to be lifted, and then, most efficiently, liquidated. A sharp, cold clarity washed over me. This wasn't about my well-being. This wasn't about genuine concern. This was about their convenience, their futures. My past, present, and future were mere stepping stones for them, obstacles to be removed from their path to greater comfort. So, I said, my voice remarkably steady, considering the seismic shift occurring within me. You've already decided all of this. My future, my home, my life. Robert smiled, a condescending, placating smile that twisted something deep inside me. We just want what's best for you, Mom. We're your children. It's our responsibility. We're just looking out for you. Responsibility. They wielded that word like a weapon, as if it gave them divine permission to erase me, to dictate my existence. My mind reeled, flashing through decades of memories, years of sleepless nights nursing them through fevers, endless carpools, driving them to practices and lessons. The sacrifices I made to ensure their college tuition was paid, the unwavering emotional support I offered through their divorces, their job losses, their countless disappointments. I had given them everything, and now they were taking everything. My eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a younger Arthur and me, vibrant, full of dreams, brimming with the promise of a life together. We had built this life, this family, with love and hard work, with prudent savings and boundless hope. All for our children, we always said, to give them a good start, to ensure their future. But what about my future? What about my peace? What about the respect I thought I had earned, simply by living, by loving, by giving? In that precise moment, a switch flipped, not with a bang, but with a silent, steel-cold click. A quiet, resolute determination settled deep within my bones, chilling me, yet empowering me. They thought they had decided my future. They thought I was a senile old woman, easily manipulated, easily managed. They were wrong, so terribly, profoundly wrong. They saw me as a faded photograph, a relic. I would show them I was still the artist, still holding the brush. I understand, I said slowly, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I appreciate your concern. The sarcasm, subtle yet potent, was lost on them. My children exchanged relieved glances. Robert even clapped his hands together lightly, a gesture of finality. Good. So, we'll start getting some estimates for the house next week. And Sarah will arrange a visit to Northwood Manor for you, Mom? Yes, I replied, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips, a smile that held a universe of defiance. You do that? They didn't notice the steel in my eyes. They didn't see the silent vow forming, hardening in my heart. They left soon after, convinced their mission was accomplished. They offered perfunctory hugs, air kisses, promises to call soon. They walked out of my house, their shoulders visibly lighter, their consciences no doubt entirely clear. The front door clicked shut. The silence that followed was deafening. It was a silence filled with betrayal, with the echoes of their audacious plans. But it was also a silence pregnant with possibility, with the first stirring of a plan of my own. They had decided my future. That hour, as I stood alone in the hallway of my desecrated home, my heart aching, but my resolve burning bright, I chose a new heir. A very different kind of future began to unfurl in my mind, a future they would never see coming. And it would start with a simple phone call, not to a real estate agent, not to an assisted living facility, but to someone who still understood what true respect meant, someone who valued a promise more than a price tag, someone who saw me. The silence after they left was a heavy blanket. It pressed down on me, suffocating. My own children. They had sat around my dining table, the very table where we had celebrated countless birthdays, holidays, graduations, and they had decided my life. It's for your own good, Mother, Mark's words echoed. His voice, once so dear, now sounded hollow, like a tomb. We just want you to be comfortable, Dad. Sarah's feigned concern. I saw the glint in her eyes. It wasn't comfort she cared about. It was convenience. It was the house. I walked through my home. Each room felt like a stage where a play had just ended, leaving me as the sole, heartbroken audience member. My armchair, my worn kitchen counter, the faded wallpaper in the hallway. These were not just walls and furniture. This was my life, my memories, my sanctuary. And they wanted to take it all away. A week later, the changes began. Small at first, almost imperceptible. My eldest, Robert, started arriving unannounced. He'd check the mail. He'd ask about my doctor's appointments. He'd suggest I hand over the bills, just to make things easier. He spoke of it as if it were a natural progression, a benevolent act. But I felt the tightening leash. Dad, you don't need to worry about the garden anymore, he'd said, eyeing my prize-winning roses. I'll have someone come by. Less stress for you, less stress for me, or less stress for him knowing I was still capable. Then Sarah started dropping hints about downsizing. This house is just too much for one person, Dad. Think of all the upkeep. She spoke of retirement communities, of assisted living, places where old people go to fade away, neatly tucked out of sight, places where I would no longer be me, but just another resident. I'd catch her staring at my antique cabinet, the one filled with my mother's porcelain figures. Her eyes weren't admiring its beauty, they were appraising its value. My grandchildren, usually so full of laughter, seemed quieter around me. They'd look at me with pity, or perhaps with a rehearsed sympathy I hadn't seen before. Had their parents already begun to poison their minds, to paint me as a burden, a fading light, soon to be extinguished? The loneliness deepened. It wasn't just the physical absence of my loved ones. It was the emotional chasm that had opened between us. They were planning my future without me. They were discussing my fate as if I were a piece of furniture to be moved or a will to be executed. One evening, I sat by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. A memory surfaced. My youngest daughter, Emily, had fallen ill as a child. A severe fever. I'd stayed by her bedside for 3 nights, without sleep, sponging her forehead, whispering stories. I remembered the sheer terror, the overwhelming love. I'd give anything for my children, I had thought then. Anything. Now, as I looked at the darkening sky, I wondered what that anything had truly cost me. Had my endless sacrifices, my unwavering support, my constant giving transformed me in their eyes? From a loving parent to a convenient resource, from a foundation of their lives to an obstacle in their path? The bitterness was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It gnawed at me. But beneath the pain, a spark began to glow, a flicker of defiance. They thought I was old. They thought I was frail. They thought I was oblivious. They thought I was beaten. They were wrong. I had spent a lifetime building this life, this house, this legacy. I had raised them, given them everything. To have it ripped away by their greedy hands, without a whisper of my consent, was an insult I could not, would not bear. My mind, though aging, was still sharp. My memory, though sometimes slow to recall a name, could perfectly replay every condescending word, every dismissive gesture. And my resolve? It was forged in the fire of their betrayal. I began to observe them differently. Their rushed visits, their pointed questions about my finances, their thinly veiled impatience when I spoke of the past. It wasn't love, it was calculation. I started to guard my words, to smile thinly when they made their pronouncements, to nod as if agreeing, while inside a silent war was brewing. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was a sheep, ready for the slaughter. But a sheep when cornered can still kick. And this old man, he had a lifetime of quiet wisdom and a growing fire of indignation. The next morning, I made my customary cup of tea. The familiar ritual was a small comfort, but this time, as I stirred the sugar, my thoughts were not of the day's trivialities. They were of action, quiet, deliberate action. I reached for the old leather-bound photo album on the shelf, not to reminisce, but to shield something. Behind it, tucked away, was a small, dusty address book. It held names and numbers I hadn't thought about in years. One in particular stood out, the name of my old lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man who valued discretion above all else. They wanted to decide my future, but they had forgotten one crucial detail. It was still my Yuan future, and I still held the pen. The decision to change my will had been a whisper in the wind after that dreadful meeting. Now it was a thunderclap, and I knew exactly what I had to do. The game, I realized, had only just begun. The quiet hours were the hardest. After they left, the house felt emptier, colder. My children, my flesh and blood, had sat in my living room. They had decided my future. Without me, I watched them. From my armchair, I watched them move about. Mark, always so quick to point out the flaws. "This place is too big, Mother. You can't manage it." Sarah, nodding along, her eyes already calculating. "It's just not practical for you anymore." They brought brochures for retirement communities, glossy pictures of smiling strangers, bingo nights, group exercises, a life prepackaged, my life. "Look, Mother, isn't this lovely?" Sarah held up a pamphlet. A woman with perfectly coiffed hair was painting in a sunlit room. I saw myself, alone, forgotten. "My garden," I said. My voice was a whisper. "Who will tend my roses?" Mark laughed. A short, dismissive sound. Roses? Mother, you can hardly bend. We'll have a team clear it out. It'll be much easier. Easier for them. Easier to forget the hours I poured into that soil. The memories each bloom held. They talked about the market, the property values, how much potential the house had. Potential for them. My home, my sanctuary, reduced to a transaction, a number on a ledger. I listened. I always listened. For 60 years I had listened to their childhood dreams, their teenage woes, their adult complaints. Their needs always came first. Now, my needs were an inconvenience. My home, an asset to be liquidated. My memories, collateral damage. That night, sleep would not come. The words echoed. Too big? Not practical. Clear it out. I walked through my house. Each room a chapter of my life. The kitchen where I baked birthday cakes. The dining room where we shared countless holiday meals. The nursery, now my small study, where I rocked them to sleep. They saw walls and a roof. I saw my heart etched into every crevice. The next morning, the real estate agent called. Mark had given them my number. Just a preliminary chat, Mrs. Evans, she chirped, to get a feel for the place. A feel for the place. She wanted to measure its worth, to strip it bare, to make it ready for strangers. I told her I was unwell, that I would call her back. She insisted. Mr. Evans mentioned you were keen to get started. Mark, again, taking decisions, speaking for me. My hand trembled as I put down the phone. My anger was a cold, steady flame now. Not a furious blaze, but a deep, burning ember. I remembered something. A small box tucked away. Old photographs, letters, and a deed. The house was mine, not theirs. Mine. I started to organize my papers, slowly, methodically, like a detective piecing together a forgotten case. Bank statements, investment accounts, old insurance policies. They had asked for these casually weeks ago. Just helping you get organized, Mother. They had taken copies. I was sure of it. They wanted to know what I had, what they stood to inherit, the indignity of it all, to be assessed, to have my life's efforts scrutinized, not out of care, but out of greed. A few days later, Sarah brought over boxes. For your things, Mother, she said brightly. You won't need all this clutter in the new place. Clutter. My grandmother's tea set, my husband's old fishing trophies, the children's drawings, framed, dusty, cherished. These were not clutter. These were my life's tapestry. I smiled, a tight, unseeing smile. Thank you, dear. So thoughtful. She didn't notice the hollowness in my voice. She was too busy making plans, plans that didn't include my feelings. She started going through a bookshelf. Oh, Mother, you still have those old things? Nobody reads actual books anymore. She picked up a worn copy of my favorite novel. I reached for it, almost instinctively. Some things are timeless, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. She merely shrugged, placing it back carelessly. That night, I called the lawyer again, not the one Mark recommended. A different one I found in the old yellow pages, tucked away in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Mr. Davies. His voice was kind, patient. He listened without interruption. I explained. Not everything, not yet. Just that I wanted to review my will, to make some changes, to ensure my wishes were respected. He scheduled a meeting for next Tuesday, when Mark and Sarah would be at work, when I would be out for a walk. The secrecy felt both liberating and terrifying. My heart pounded with each step I took, each word I spoke into the phone. Was this wrong? To keep secrets from my children? But they had kept their plans from me. They had decided my future behind my back. I had always prided myself on my honesty, my straightforwardness. But honesty had not served me well. It had left me vulnerable. I started making my own list, not of things to pack, but of things to consider. Who had been truly kind? Who had shown me respect, not because of expectation, but out of genuine care? My mind drifted to Elena, my neighbor from across the street, a young woman, barely 30. She was always there, mowing my lawn when my back was bad, bringing me soup when I had the flu, stopping by for a cup of tea just to chat, never asking for anything. She would listen, truly listen, to my stories about the garden, about my late husband, about the small joys of my day. She didn't see me as a burden. She saw me as a person. One afternoon, I was struggling with a heavy bag of groceries. Mark had promised to come by, but he had cancelled last minute. Emergency at work, mother? Always an emergency. Eleanor saw me from her window. She rushed over, took the bag from my hand. Mrs. Evans, you shouldn't be carrying this alone. She carried it inside, put everything away, even offered to make me tea. We sat for a while, talking about her studies, her dreams of opening a small flower shop. She loved my roses. She knew their names. They're beautiful, Mrs. Evans, she said, gently touching a wilting petal. You have such a green thumb. My children had called them clutter. The contrast was stark, like sunlight against shadow. Could I truly consider such a thing? To bypass my own children? The thought felt treasonous. Yet, the thought of them tearing apart my life, dismissing my memories, felt like a deeper betrayal. The next Sunday lunch was particularly difficult. They had invited the real estate agent to join us. A casual introduction, they called it. Just so she can meet you, mother. She smiled too brightly. She talked about downsizing options, about maximizing potential. My potential as an aging woman was to shrink, to disappear, to become a statistic. I picked at my food. The roast lamb, a family tradition, tasted like ash. Mark talked about renovating the house. Sarah talked about an investment opportunity. They spoke as if I wasn't there, as if I was a piece of furniture, already earmarked for removal. I need to tell you something, I began, my voice wavering. I wanted to tell them I would not be moved, that I would not be silenced. Mark looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. Yes, mother? I've decided to postpone any decisions for a while. I chose my words carefully. Sarah put her fork down. Postpone? But we've already set things in motion. The agent is here. We have viewings lined up for next week. Viewings? My heart hammered. They hadn't told me about viewings. They had gone behind my back again. It's just to get a feel, mother, Mark said, his voice now impatient. No commitment yet, just a look. A look at my life, for sale. The anger solidified, hard and cold as stone. This was not about my well-being. This was about their agenda, their convenience, their inheritance. I swallowed. The words I wanted to say died on my tongue. It was useless. They would not hear me. Very well, I said instead. My voice was calm, too calm. I understand. They exchanged relieved glances. They thought I had capitulated, that I had given in. They were wrong. The meeting with Mr. Davies was crucial. I spent the days leading up to it, rehearsing what I would say, what I wanted, what I deserved. I had always been a giver, my entire life. It was time to take back some control, some dignity. I gathered my original will, the one they knew about, the one that split everything equally, the one that, in their eyes, guaranteed their future. It was a flimsy piece of paper, easily changed, easily rewritten. I looked at the names on it, my children's names, names I had once spoken with such love. Now they tasted like ash in my mouth. The clock ticked towards Tuesday. Each tick a countdown, not to my future being decided by them, but to me deciding my own. I still felt the tremor of fear, but beneath it, a strength was growing, a quiet, unyielding strength, the strength of a woman who had been pushed too far. They would be surprised. Oh, yes, they would be very, very surprised. The pieces were moving, slowly, secretly, and they had no idea. The roses in my garden were still blooming, defiant, beautiful, just like me. They would not be cleared out. Not yet. The lawyer's office was a sanctuary, a hushed room far removed from the clamor and demands I'd endured at my own kitchen table. Mr. Davies, with his silver hair and gentle demeanor, was a beacon of calm. He possessed an almost uncanny ability to listen, truly listen, without judgment. He saw the tremor in my hand, yes, but he also saw the unyielding resolve in my eyes, a resolve born of a lifetime of quiet endurance now finally turned outward. I want to make some significant changes, I told him, my voice a soft whisper that carried an unexpected weight. To my will, to everything I own. He simply nodded, his pen poised. A slow, deliberate movement. And what are these changes, Mrs. Eleanor? I took a deep, fortifying breath. It felt like drawing in control, reclaiming the very air that filled my lungs. My own life, finally. My children, I began, and the words, though heavy, felt like stones finally being lifted from my burdened heart. David and Martha, they will receive nothing, not a single penny from my estate. Mr. Davies didn't flinch. His expression remained neutral, professional. He simply wrote it down. Each crisp scratch of his pen on the legal paper felt like an act of creation, a victory in miniature, a reclaiming of my own dignity, piece by piece. "And who will be the new beneficiary?" he asked, looking up at me over the rim of his glasses. His gaze was searching, professional, but not in any way accusatory. That was the question that had gnawed at me. The person, the individual who saw me, Eleanor Vance, not just the house, the savings, the collection of assets. I hadn't yet settled on a definitive name. Not then. But a quiet hope had begun to bloom in my heart. A whisper of an idea, a face that kept coming back to me, a simple act of kindness, remembered. I confessed my need for a little more time. To be absolutely, unequivocally sure. He understood. He urged me to take all the time I needed, to consider every angle. This was, after all, a profound and life-altering decision, not just for me, but for the legacy I would leave behind. He assured me he would be ready when I was. Leaving his office, the world outside shimmered with a new, almost fragile brightness. The trees seemed greener, the sky bluer. Perhaps it wasn't the world that had changed, but my perception of it. My eyes, once clouded by years of hurt and silent resentment, now saw with a startling clarity, fueled by a singular, unwavering purpose. Days bled into weeks. My children continued their predictable routine of calls. Almost always, the conversation gravitated towards the house, or their carefully constructed plans for my future. "Mom, just a reminder about that lovely assisted living facility we toured," Martha would chirp, her voice falsely bright. "It has such wonderful activities. Really, it's for the best. You'll love it." David, ever the pragmatic one, would add, "We'll need to come over next week to help you start packing some things. Just the essentials, you know." Some things. They meant all things. My entire life, my cherished memories, neatly boxed and labeled, for someone else to sort, to discard, to claim. They planned to erase my existence from these walls, without a second thought. I'd offer vague smiles, agree to nothing concrete. allowing their words to wash over me like a harmless tide, like water off a duck's back. Indeed, they were so utterly oblivious. They never noticed the subtle shift in my gaze, the quiet steel that had replaced the former resignation, the tiny, almost imperceptible spark of defiance deep within my irises. I began my observation. My chosen candidate, Sarah, Sarah Jenkins, from the community garden down the street. The young woman with dirt perpetually under her fingernails, a sun-kissed face, and an easy, genuine laugh. She always offered to help me with my unruly tomato plants, patiently explaining the finer points of pruning. She'd bring me extra zucchini or cucumbers from her own abundant harvest, never once asking for anything in return, not even a thank you. Just a quiet smile, a nod of genuine camaraderie. I remembered the day my back had seized up, a cruel twist of pain that left me unable to even bend down to water my beloved roses. I had called David my son, hoping for a moment of familial concern. His response had been swift and dismissive. "Mom, I'm really swamped. Big meeting tomorrow. Can't you just get the neighbor to help?" My daughter Martha had merely sighed on the phone, a sound laced with thinly veiled exasperation. "Mom, honestly, you need to be more careful. You're simply not as young as you used to be. Perhaps it's a sign you need more help around the house." A sign to leave Annie, my house, she meant. It was Sarah who saw me struggling that afternoon. She was simply passing by, her basket overflowing with fresh vegetables from the garden. She stopped, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "Mrs. Vance, are you all right? You look like you're in pain." Without waiting for an answer, she gently took my watering can, filled it at the outdoor tap, and methodically watered every single rose bush, her movements fluid and unhurried. Afterwards, she made me a soothing cup of herbal tea and stayed for over an hour, just talking, listening, about my roses, about the old neighborhood, about anything and everything that interested me, not her. She never mentioned my house. She never cast a calculating glance at my antique furniture or my silver heirlooms. She simply offered kindness, a rare, unadulterated human connection. I started to invite her for tea more often. She'd bring me a new book from the library, her recommendations always thoughtful and engaging. We'd talk about the changing seasons, about her quiet dreams of opening a small independent flower shop, about the beauty she found in the most ordinary moments of life. She reminded me so much of myself years ago, before the gradual weight of unmet expectations, before the slow creeping chill of familial disappointment had settled deep into my bones. My children, meanwhile, were already dividing the spoils, long before they were ever theirs. Over Sunday lunch, Martha launched into an elaborate description of the necessary renovations she'd make to my living room. "That old rug, Mom, it simply has to go. And the wallpaper, darling, it's just so, you know, dated." She waved a dismissive hand, as if wiping away decades of my life. David, ever the shrewd businessman, chimed in. "We could probably get a very decent price for the antique chest in the hallway. It's a proper collector's item. And the china cabinet, a bit dusty, but with a good clean." His voice trailed off into a speculative hum. They spoke as if I were already a forgotten memory, as if I were a ghost at my own dining table, silently presiding over my own dismantling. My heart ached, but the pain was different now. Not the raw, searing stab of fresh betrayal, but a dull, distant throb. Because I held my secret close, my silent, growing power, nurtured in the quiet corners of my mind. I listened to them, planning their bright new lives, so carelessly built upon the very foundations of my old one. Their laughter, once a source of joy, now sounded hollow and brittle to my ears. Their greed, once subtly hidden, was now blindingly transparent. They saw an inheritance, a windfall. I saw a legacy, and my legacy, I vowed, would not be defined by their brazen entitlement. I met with Mr. Davies again. This time, I had a name, a conviction. Sarah Jenkins, I stated, clearly, unequivocally. She will receive everything, my entire estate. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable, yet understanding. He asked if I was absolutely sure, completely certain. My gaze met his, unwavering. More sure, I affirmed, than I have ever been about anything in my entire life. He began preparing the final documents. It took time, a meticulous dance of legalities, clauses, and safeguards, ensuring every aspect was ironclad. While he worked, my thoughts drifted to this house, my home, the place where I had raised my children, where I had laughed with their father, where we had built a life together, brick by brick, memory by memory. They wanted to sell it, to liquidate it, to divide the money and discard it like an old worn-out code. But it was so much more than a house. It was a living repository of my very being, and I would not, could not, allow them to desecrate it in that way. The day came to sign the new will. I dressed carefully, choosing my best dress, a deep navy blue reserved for the most significant occasions. This was indeed a special occasion, a profound act of liberation. Mr. Davies read out the document, slowly, deliberately. Each paragraph, each carefully worded clause was a potent reaffirmation of my decision. My children, David and Martha, explicitly excluded. Sarah Jenkins, the quiet, kind soul, named as the sole beneficiary of my entire estate, my house, my investments, my personal effects, everything. My hand, holding the pen, did not tremble. It was firm, confident. The ink flowed smoothly, permanently, unchangeable, like my unwavering resolve. When I left the office that day, a monumental weight had lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't the weight of sadness, but of a heavy burden finally shed, the burden of unfulfilled expectation, the burden of blood ties that had twisted into suffocating chains. I was free, free to choose, free to define my own end, my own legacy. I clutched the sealed envelope, the official copy of my new will, close to my chest. It felt like a silent shield, a quiet revolution, brewing beneath the surface of my outwardly calm life. My children continued their oblivious dance around my existence, making plans, drawing diagrams, calculating potential figures. They genuinely believed they had me cornered. They truly thought they had already won. But the game, as they say, was far, far from over. And I, Eleanor Vance, now held the winning hand. They just didn't know it yet. This was the quiet before the storm, the deceptive calm before the inevitable, shattering truth. The ink was dry, each stroke of the pen a silent thunderclap. It was done. The new will, sealed and witnessed, lay heavy in my hands, not heavy with dread, but with a profound liberating weight. This piece of paper, barely a few pages long, held the power to reshape futures, not just mine, but theirs, the future my children had so carelessly tried to dictate. I looked out the window. The old oak tree in the yard stood steadfast. It had seen generations come and go, witnessed my children grow from babes to adults. It had borne silent witness to their laughter, their arguments, their ambitions, and now it would in time bear witness to this, to the quiet revolution I had orchestrated from my armchair. The children, they still called, their voices, a symphony of casual entitlement. Mother, have you thought about downsizing? Dad, remember that antique cabinet? I always loved it. They spoke of my home as if it were already a shared estate, a mere stepping stone to their own desires. They spoke of my possessions as if they were already heirlooms, assigned and claimed. Just last Sunday, Sarah called, her tone bright and breezy. Mom, we were thinking of visiting next month. Maybe we could look at some brochures for assisted living. There's a lovely one with a garden, perfect for you. Perfect for me. Not for us. Never for us. Just for me, alone, tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. A coldness settled in my chest, familiar now, but no longer paralyzing. It was a coldness of resolve. The garden Sarah spoke of, my own garden, right here, was where I found peace, where I tended my roses, where I watched the birds. They wanted to uproot me, like an old withered plant, and replant me somewhere convenient for them. I remembered the day I signed the papers. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose quiet empathy I had come to appreciate, had looked at me. Are you absolutely certain, Mrs. Peterson? This is a significant change. I had met his gaze. My voice, steady, though my heart beat a quiet drum. Mr. Henderson, I have never been more certain of anything in my life. He didn't pry. He simply nodded, his eyes reflecting a silent understanding. He had seen it all before. The quiet tragedies, the family betrayals. He understood that sometimes the greatest acts of self-preservation come cloaked in quiet defiance. The surprising new heir. Ah, yes, the name that would drop like a stone into their well-ordered lives. It wasn't a charity, though I considered many worthy causes. It wasn't a long-lost cousin, though I scanned old photo albums for forgotten faces. It was someone closer, someone who saw me, truly saw me, when my own children looked straight through. It was Maria. Maria, my caregiver. Not a stranger, not an employee. She had become so much more. She came into my home 2 years ago, a whirlwind of quiet competence and genuine warmth. She didn't just tidy up or prepare meals. She listened. She laughed at my old stories. She brought me fresh flowers from her own small garden. She remembered my favorite tea. She asked about my day and actually waited for an answer. She never spoke of my house as an inheritance. She never hinted at my money. She simply existed, a beacon of kindness in a world that had grown increasingly dim. She treated me with dignity, with respect, with an affection that felt entirely unearned, yet deeply cherished. My children had dismissed her. Just a help, Mom. Don't get too attached. She's a professional. They saw only a hired hand. I saw a daughter I never had, a child who understood the quiet language of care. The will specified everything: my home, my savings, a small annuity. It all went to Maria, with specific instructions for her to use the funds to pursue her dream of opening a small community center for seniors, a place where they wouldn't feel alone, a place where they would be seen, heard, respected, a place inspired by the very loneliness I had endured. I even set aside a small symbolic sum for each of my children, enough for a decent bouquet of flowers for my grave perhaps, or a single, well-chosen meal to toast my memory. A final gentle reminder that while I loved them, love did not equate to blind entitlement. The copy of the will now resided in a secure fireproof box, alongside my other important documents. Another copy was with Mr. Henderson, and a third, a sealed envelope, was tucked away, marked, to be opened upon my passing. It contained a personal letter explaining my decision, a letter filled with more sorrow than anger, more hope than regret, a letter they would read, and perhaps finally understand. The children would visit soon. They would bring their usual expectations, their thinly veiled plans. They would speak of my future, their future, with an air of certainty. And I would listen. I would nod. I would offer them tea, made just how they liked it. I would play my part. But inside, A silent shift had occurred. The power had returned to my hands. The game, as they saw it, was about to change. Not with shouts or arguments, but with the quiet, devastating force of truth. The truth of a mother's heart, broken and then rebuilt, piece by deliberate piece. The doorbell rang. It was Mark, my eldest. He had a triumphant smile, carrying a brochure for a gated retirement community. "Mom," he boomed, "we found it. The perfect place." I smiled back, a calm, knowing smile he would never understand. Not yet. I would let him talk. Let them all talk. For a little while longer. The clock was ticking. Their hour of decision was long past. My hour, the hour I chose my new heir, had already come and gone. And soon, very soon, the silence would break. And then the real conversation would begin. I poured him a cup of tea, just the way he liked it. The storm was coming, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt ready.